most helpful. Maybe just to set the scene a little bit, I'd just like to start with a few numbers and remind everyone of a few numbers. 1 in every 4 children, school-aged children, so a child between 3 and 18, which is about 462 million children, are actually today growing up in a place that is somehow affected by conflict or crisis, or some form of crisis. So 1 in every 4 school-aged children. And if you look at countries affected alone, we estimate that in those 35 countries that are affected by conflict in one way or another, 75 million of them are actually out of school. And that's 17 million of those are actually refugee children. And if I talk about a region that I know well, which is the region of West and Central Africa, where I was serving before, if you look at the Lake Chad region and the crisis that has affected the Lake Chad, so Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, at the moment, the 4 countries account for 14 million children out of school. 14 million primary school children actually out of school at the moment. And we know Syria, 1.7 million children inside Syria out of school, and 2.3 million children are actually refugees from Syria, refugees in neighboring countries. And I can go on and on with numbers like this. It's also important, I think, to remember, and it was mentioned in one of the panels yesterday, that the average duration the average time a child will remain a refugee child, when a child is actually becoming a refugee, the average time he or she will remain a refugee is 17 years. So a child who gets to start being a refugee at 2 or 3 years old is basically going to go through their whole youth and childhood and youth as a refugee. So hence the importance of acting quite fast on this. So I think those numbers are really what I think why UNICEF exists, but also what a lot of the other partners we have here actually exist today, and a lot of partners, and why we also have those discussions at the DIAB, and we need to. Now, for the question, we must invest in education, we need to turn the tide. First of all, I think it's to break the cycle of poverty, the cycle of violence, the cycle of inequality, that actually feeds on many crises. I think it's the usual, and we talked about it yesterday in some other panel, it's the usual issue about how many times are we going to go back to the same communities to actually help the children of the children we should have helped in the first place, and kind of at some point break that cycle. And break that cycle of inequality. We know today that the horizontal inequalities, so inequalities across different groups, different ethnic groups, religion, are actually the inequalities that actually feed the conflicts the most at the moment. And so the likelihood of experiencing violent conflicts actually doubles in a country where there's high education inequalities, hence the importance of doing it. But education is also a way to mitigate, and you mentioned it earlier, the psychosocial, longer-term impact actually conflicts might have on children. This simple fact, and this is something that all the practitioners in the field can tell you have experienced, the fact of reestablishing early on in the crisis the routine for a child going to school on a regular basis and having timing, and also for the parents to be able to ensure that is actually extremely important in the way children are recovering psychologically and in their social interaction with others. But it's also bringing dignity back to children and bringing dignity back to families during those times that we actually go back into this routine of actually learning. But also, and I think it's clear for everyone, children who are out of school and without education are more at risk of falling into extremism or traffickers or other forms of exploitation. And I think I'd like to make a point here that to me is striking, is when you look currently at the attacks on education, the attacks on school that are actually happening across the world. When you look at the region I know well, again, Boko Haram, for example, but also some other actions in the Sahel, Northern Mali, and other places, these attacks on schools are not a coincidence. And I think it's the signal also that these groups in many ways understand how education is powerful to pull communities and children out of poverty and also out of extremism. And so the fact that those schools are targeted, I think, is as much a motivation for us to actually try to reinforce education and schooling in those areas. But also we must invest in education because, of course, children are investment in a better world. This is clear. Education is a fundamental right. It's not just something we're doing out of charity. It's actually a right. It's the right that is clear on the rights of the child. And it's, of course, a crucial opportunity for all. It's key to a better life. It's key to less poverty, better health, increased ability to take future in their own hands. I think think that's quite clear. But, and particularly when I'm looking at girls' education, which is an area in which we need to do a lot better, it is also a key to the building of resilience of communities and families, of individuals, of course, but also families and communities to face other shocks, whether they are actually natural disasters or other forms of shocks and tensions are actually happening in communities. And we all know that, by the way, it's an important investment because we all know that children of educated women actually, and girls are actually much more likely to survive their 5th birthday and then be educated themselves. But also we need to invest, all of us, in education because many don't invest in education. Education receives less than 2% of overall humanitarian funding across the world, less than 2%. And although we've all increased the demand for education funding by 126% over the past 10 years, the actual funding that's come has only increased by 4% for education. This year we've just launched our Humanitarian Action for Children appeal, UNICEF, and actually this is the first time education is such a high amount. It's a high part, and 25% of the funds we're requesting across this appeal actually for education. And so it's quite really unique in that sense. So I guess failing to invest would be very short-sighted. What I want to say here is also it is possible to do education work in emergencies and crisis. I think we underestimate that. It is actually possible. It can be done in many ways. In 2016, with our partners, UNICEF and many other partners, we supported 8.2 million children access to education in crisis situations. So it is actually possible. There are many ways of doing it. I'm not going to go into detail, but we can get, if you want, into some more details. And by the way, it's interesting to see that now it also includes Europe with migrants and refugee children. Actually, UNICEF has gotten involved progressively in making sure that those children are in school and given school opportunities. So, again, new areas of our action. Finally, what I would like to say is obviously when we deliver education, we are delivering a future. We're delivering a future for those children, we're delivering a future for the families, for the communities, and for the countries. And I would say people get it right. I've been very struck being in the field, for example, in Borno State very recently, a number of times last year, looking at the IDP sites where we bring, where we have all these IDPs in Borno State, to see the number of families, children, and families actually queuing to get into schools, to get registered. And so many actually of them being registered for the first time. They had never been to school before, which, by the way, is quite ironic to think that actually a war or a crisis that was started by a group trying to prevent children from going to school is actually turning around into us bringing more kids to school now. But I always remember this one, and this is to finish, but one of a tribal leader I had met actually in Chad, on the shores of Lake Chad. I remember one, he was a very traditional man with a very traditional tribe there, and they had lost absolutely everything in the way everything they had. And I was saying, okay, I need to convince this man that we need to do education, and I need to convince him we need to bring girls into schools in particular. And he's the one actually came to me and he said, look, there's one thing I need to ask you, is education. That was a little bit surprising, I didn't really expect that. And he said, well, it's important because I realized with this crisis that, any group or anyone can take away anything they want away from us. But the only thing you cannot take away from someone is their education. That's the only thing we're going to travel with. We could be refugees, we could be uprooted, we could, having to leave and move somewhere else, we lose our house, we lose our camels, we lose everything we have. But education is something we'll take with us. So please make sure you educate our girls and our kids. So I thought that was quite interesting. Maybe just the very last one I want to say is I think at the same time, we also need to be careful and able to present better offers of education and new forms of education. It came up in one of the panels yesterday. There are also different ways of bringing education in emergencies, but also listening more to communities, to parents, to children themselves on what kind of education they actually need in these circumstances. It actually makes the most use and would be more helpful for them to actually move on to a different stage of health.
Well, we have some students here.
Yes, with us, work with all the partners and other groups. But it's also, of course, trying to attract funding and get funding and make sure we channel funding through organization, grassroots organization. We're also present in all the countries. We're present at a fairly decentralized level. And so it's either working with the governments and ministries of education, for example, when it comes to education, making sure they get the supplies, the textbooks, whatever is needed, the teachers that are being trained, but also trying to find, again, new ways and propose new ideas and new ways of actually delivering education. But in crisis situation, it can be just organize rapid schooling in displaced people's camp and refugee camps, making sure it's available from the beginning, making sure that we try to find all the teachers that are among the refugees or others, try to make sure we rapidly agree on the kind of basic knowledge that will be given to those use cases. Make sure we provide also water and sanitation to schools, because we know how important it is in those situations to make sure, particularly that girls will be willing to go to school. So it's basically organize services. So it's to work at all levels, at the policy level, bring on board the key players, bring on board interest and keenness to actually do something about it. But it's then bring it down to the country level and then bring it down to the community level, having this interaction with community leaders on what is the best solution to this and deliver it with partners, NGOs, grassroots organizations, other out-of-school children are actually in this particular region. I mean, the enforcement issue is not easy. I mean, it's something that we do all the time, of course, advocate and make sure that people understand. But I think beyond enforcement, one of the points we need to really try to work more on is and I think it's the ASDG framework actually gives us a much stronger framework of accountability and a lot stronger framework of getting people involved themselves in asking for the services and requesting and demanding the services, a certain quality of services. We have in Nigeria, for example, I think this is our broadest network of what we call youth reporters, so young people who use their mobile phones to actually be consulted regularly on issues that actually concern them and interest them and get their opinions in. And so I think one of the points we're trying to really push increasingly, and it's going to be important in major institutions as well, is making sure we get feedback from the population, and then that feedback actually goes to people who manage budgets and manage services and make the point that at the end of the day, these are people that need to be held accountable. So I think beyond what we do ourselves at the multilateral level and reminding people of their commitments that they have taken when they've signed a particular convention or ratified a particular treaty in general, I think it's going to be a lot more efficient when we get real accountability mechanism coming from the communities and the people themselves towards their leaders. I think it's going to be a lot more listened to and heard. But I think one point I want to make is that a lot of the crisis we're looking at, and it's not only conflicts, it's also health crisis. For me, Ebola was an important, worked a lot on the situation there. Is really those crises really give us a map of exclusion, including exclusion from education. The places where disease tend to last longer and be more resistant to our efforts are actually places where exclusion is there and education is not to the level it should be in conflict as well. So I think also reminding governments that the potential impact and long-term impact, but also the funding that actually not investing in education can actually mean and investment later on that would have to be done on the internet is actually important. But I think social accountability is going to make the difference. We need to just bring back the voice to people who actually can demand the services